The suffrage leader Carrie Chapman Catt knew that the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, would depend on the South. But the South was the most dedicated to preserving the traditional order. The outcome in North Carolina could determine the future for women of the whole country.
A politician who didn't support women's suffrage would be concerned about preserving men's rights as heads of households, would be concerned about preserving the Democratic Party's power, would be concerned about preserving white supremacy, which is gendered as well. What's going to happen if you enfranchise women? Black women are going to come to vote. And what are they going to do about that?
You ask me why I'm always teasing you. You hate to have me call you pretty, baby. I really thought that
Women had a vital role in preserving white supremacy in the South, but as a muse, not as a direct participant, historian Marjorie Wheeler writes. The white woman of the South could not be the savior of white political supremacy. She was the reason for it. White supremacy took a different form in the North, and in the western frontier, women were more equal. Wyoming became the first territory to grant women the right to vote. Yet things were changing in the South, too. Cities were growing and more women were entering the workforce. Among the middle class, both white and black women were getting more access to education, where they were taught progressive ideals.
So with that education, they were being instilled with this idea that it's their duty to sort of help society.
And it was a time when women, even before they had the vote, started entering public life to kind of clean up corruption in politics, to solve problems bred by urbanization and industrialization. And so women kind of called it municipal housekeeping. You could use the traditional gender roles and say, you know, we take care of the children in the home and make sure they have healthy food or, you know, safe milk to drink. And now we need to make our local government ensure that for everyone else.
One such woman was Gertrude Weil of Goldsboro, North Carolina, a daughter of Jewish immigrants. She was active in the North Carolina Federation of Women's Clubs. As the club women organized behind social justice issues, they realized they wouldn't get far unless they themselves were enfranchised.
And so, you know, as women got involved in these kind of acceptable organizations, they would then move into suffrage organizations as they saw that as the next kind of logical step to actually make these reforms a real possibility for them.
In 1915, Gertrude Weil took the next step and became president of the North Carolina Equal Suffrage League.
If we were the ones voting on these issues, then we would actually have more of a say in making sure that a lot of these reforms are happening.
Women's clubs like the YWCA created some of the first opportunities for black women and white women to work together towards shared goals.
It's kind of a political strategy. Black women had to kind of become what one scholar calls racial diplomats, seeking services for the community by making connections with white women.
There was another kind of Southern club woman. Mary Hilliard Hinton of Midway Plantation in Wake County was from one of the oldest families in North Carolina. She was active in conservative women's clubs concerned with preserving white supremacy.
These women were savvy. I mean, there's hardly a town without a statue to a Confederate soldier. They're also very concerned with education. They're writing textbooks that glorify the Reconstruction era Klan so that each generation of white children that follows learns this proper romantic history. And that lasts for a really long time.
Anti-suffrage women had brothers in the legislature and husbands in Congress. Their families owned plantations in the East and textile mills in the Piedmont. Mary Hinton's uncle had been governor. She feared her family might lose power if women got the vote.
Well, there were a lot of women that thought that what they needed the state to do was to sort of protect that kind of patriarchal system where the man provided for and protected the woman.
Anti-suffragists would say, what's going to happen if a woman wants to vote for somebody different than her husband? It'll be chaos. It'll be anarchy at home. It'll destroy marriages.
Despite that attitude, North Carolina women gathered for their first annual convention of the equal suffrage in 1914. The next year, they even managed to get an equal suffrage bill introduced, but it went down in defeat. Legislators from districts with large black populations had been opposed.
They worked really hard to rid politics of black people. Violence, laws, literacy tests, all kinds of stuff, right?
But white suffragists turned that argument on its head. They reasoned that votes for women would actually strengthen white supremacy.
They were saying, oh, well, it's not a threat to enfranchise white women because don't worry, through literacy tests, through poll taxes, you've already disenfranchised all of the people of color. So actually using that as a way of sort of justifying their own voting rights in an extremely problematic way.
When African American suffragists worked alongside white women, they did so with this knowledge, often facing criticism for betraying their race. But they hoped, with the vote, they could reclaim the political power that had been taken away from black men. By 1917, the first northeastern state passes full suffrage. Pressure grows in the South, and Arkansas gives women the right to vote in primaries. The North Carolina legislature reconsiders, but again, the suffragists are defeated. Still, the Northern suffragists needed the South in order to make progress.
National, the Nassau and Carrie Chapman Catt took a very deliberate, so-called Southern strategy that accepted that premise and said, okay, well, we're going to try and focus on the South. We realize it's a really important voting bloc. And so if we can get some, states in the South to actually vote for women's suffrage, that later when we try to get a national amendment passed, it'll be easier to ratify it. And so to do so, we are happy to participate in this kind of racial rhetoric that says, oh, we can actually help you, become a bastion of white supremacy if you actually give white women the right to vote.
It was written, in North Carolina, the white population is 70% and the Negro 30%. Hence, there are 50,000 more white women than all the Negro men and Negro women put together. The admission of the women to the suffrage, therefore, could not possibly jeopardize white supremacy, but would make it more secure. But Gertrude Weil would not use that argument.
I think something that was different about her style is that rather than avoid it, she kind of dealt with it in a straightforward way.
Weil and her supporters' arguments gained ground when the U.S. entered World War I.
Women were selling Liberty bonds. In North Carolina, women sold about $9 million worth of Liberty bonds. They were involved in the Red Cross. They were involved in all these other kinds of organizations that were really trying to coordinate efforts to support American soldiers abroad, but also doing things like boycotting German goods at home. And so they really framed a lot of that wartime work and a lot of that wartime effort as, we've done our patriotic duty. We are serving the nation, we're serving the community, and so this is one of the reasons that we need the right to vote. And some people were very persuaded by that.
With the war coming to an end in June 1918, Congress passed a bill for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In a matter of days, states started signing on. By March 22, 1920, only one more state was needed to ratify the amendment. The nation's attention turned to Raleigh. Hinton, leading the North Carolina chapter of the Southern Women's Rejection League, and Weil, leading the North Carolina Equal Suffrage League, both set up headquarters in the state capitol. President Wilson, who had previously rejected suffrage, called North Carolina's governor, urging the state to pass the amendment. But North Carolina's legislatures rebuffed the president. They tabled the vote and even sent a telegram to Tennessee, urging them to do the same. In Tennessee, the vote was also close.
Harry Byrne, young freshman legislator in Tennessee, is the guy who casts the deciding vote at the last minute, and Tennessee becomes the 36th state, which is what they needed to ratify the 19th Amendment. At the time of his vote, Byrne has in his pocket a letter from his mother, which says, and I quote, "Don't forget to be a good boy and vote for suffrage," end quote. So that's how a battle that had been going on since 1848 across how many generations ended. This one young guy and a note from his mama. I love that. It's crazy.
You ask me why I'm always teasing you. You hate to have me call you pretty, baby. I really
Passage of the 19th Amendment forced North Carolina's lawmakers to allow women the vote. Gertrude Waugh became president of the new North Carolina League of Women Voters and campaigned thousands of women to register.
baby talk and baby walk and curly hair.
After the 19th Amendment is ratified, they go register to vote and they vote in November. But what happens is the expected woman's vote, women voting as a bloc, never really materializes.
And I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, won't you come and let me rock you in my cradle of love, and we'll cuddle all the time. Oh, I want to love and baby, and it might as well be you. Pretty baby of mine. Your mother says you were the cutest kid. No wonder, dearie, that I'm wild about you. And all the cunning things you said and did, why I love to fondly recall. And just like Peter Pan, it seems you'll always be the same sweet, cunning little baby dear to me. And that is why I'm sure that I will. Everybody loves a baby, that's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, and I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, won't you come and let me rock you?